At the University of Ottawa, you are getting prestige and recognition. We are one of Canada's U15 universities. That's one of the group of 15 top prestigious research-intensive universities. And getting a degree at the University of Ottawa, it gives you good recognition here in Canada, wherever you might go, or if you were to go back home or somewhere else in the world, your degree really holds you in good stead from the University of Ottawa. We do make sure that we give students resources. We want to make sure that you have good research facilities and good teaching. However, we want to make sure you have the resources to do your own work, to pursue your own ideas, and to be successful in your own ways. Certainly, inclusion and extracurricular activities are very important for us. There's lots of different teams and sports and clubs that you can join in. You can try out to be on competitive, very high-performing teams, or you can just join in some games much more casually if that's kind of your thing. If you want to learn to play ice hockey, you are very welcome to do so. If that's not your kind of thing, you don't have to. We do have football or soccer teams if that is more the type of thing that you like to do. If sports are not your thing either, there are cultural and arts activities that you can join in as well. We want to make sure that you feel included and that you have a good life while you're here studying and researching. And of course, internationalization is very important to us. This means that we want international students to come and feel welcome and be successful on our campus. But we want to make sure that you, as an international student, you learn from other international students from around the world and that you have the opportunities to share your culture. So if you want to create a club or create an activity, at times you can get small bits of money to run different activities. And this is something that's very important to us. We want to make sure that students have the opportunity to learn and share about each other's cultures. Here in Ottawa, we are, it's a medium-sized city by Canadian standards. It's about 1 million people officially, which means that it's big enough that you can have a pretty good quality of life here in Ottawa. There's decent public transportation. You can get most of the things that you would want. However, it's not gigantic. Traffic tends to flow reasonably well. Sometimes it's a little bit heavy first thing in the morning when everyone's going to work, but it's not going to really have a significant impact on the quality of your life. It's really a good place to live and work and study here in Ottawa. And in case you weren't aware, Ottawa is the capital city of Canada. The capital is not Vancouver, it's not Montreal, and it's not Toronto. It is in fact Ottawa, even though we are a smaller city than those other better known Canadian cities. But it is a nice place where you will actually be studying and researching on our campus, which is right downtown. On your screen right now, this is a photo of Canada's National Parliament, and you can see this Parliament from the edge of University of Ottawa campus. So you really are going to be working right downtown. And it's a great opportunity for you to network and connect with organizations and people in the capital of a G7 country. Overall, my message here is that we want to make sure that when you come to the University of Ottawa, you have the resources and you feel confident and you're prepared to be successful academically, professionally, and personally. So this is very important to us. Now, very quickly, where is Ottawa? I imagine that many of you do know, or I hope you know. However, if you're not too familiar, you will see on the screen, there's the world and there's Canada. Hope that's not a surprise. Ottawa, as you can see, is located roughly between Montreal and Toronto here in Canada. It's closer to Montreal than Toronto, and it's kind of northwest of New York and Boston. You can take a bus to New York City overnight if you want. So it is possible to go to New York City by bus for the weekend, although it's a little bit of a long bus journey. It is possible and reasonably affordable. So you are in a good location to reach these other major cities. You have access to the different amenities that would be available in those larger culture centers. So U Ottawa at a glance. If you were not aware, the University of Ottawa is officially a French-English bilingual university. We are the largest French-English bilingual university in the world, but this does not mean it is mandatory. The bilingualism is an option. That means that we have students who study 100% in English, we have some students who study 100% in French, and we have some students who study in both languages. If you only speak English, you are very welcome to study at the University of Ottawa. You do not have to speak French. That is not an obligation. However, if you want to learn to speak French, we have resources to help support you and help you learn your third or fourth language, whatever it might be. And depending on your program of studies, you can ask permission to take these extra French language classes for free, as long as you're doing well in your core academic subject. Looking at rankings worldwide, we are consistently within the top 2%. Certainly, depending on the ranking system that you look at, we rank differently depending on the methodology. Very recently, this past year, we were ranked in the top 150 worldwide universities by Times Higher Education. I believe we were ranked 69th in terms of commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. And then if you look at other ranking systems, we fall somewhere else, but consistently in the top 2% of universities in the world. We are a fairly large university at about 43,000 students. By Canadian standards, that's quite large. I know for some of you, depending on where you're coming from, you come from countries where universities can be even bigger than that. For us, that's pretty big. And about 14% of those students are international students from around the world. Now, if you are coming to do a graduate program, that means master's degree, PhD, or potentially a graduate diploma, the majority of those programs will have some connection and some activity involving research. We are a research-intensive university, and we are comprehensive, but we effectively have 4 key pillars of our research strategy. You can see them there on the screen there right now. We have a sustainable environment, digital world, advancing just societies, that's justice, and enabling lifelong health and wellness. These are kind of the 4 key areas, but there are a lot of research areas that connect these pillars, as you can well imagine. So certainly, by no means are you limited to what you see on the screen. This just gives you an idea of how some of our research might be grouped here at the university. So, in terms of our organization as an institution, we do have 9 different faculties. You can see them on the screen there. The titles of the faculties tend to be rather broad, but within each of those faculties, there are many different programs that are housed that are much more detailed. I do recommend that you have a look within multiple faculties for a program that might interest you. Just because the program that may be best suited for you may not actually be in the faculty that you expect. For example, economics. I know in many places, economics would logically be found under the Faculty of Management. However, for us at the University of Ottawa, economics is found in the Faculty of Social Sciences. Another example, our program in environmental sustainability. This is a cross-disciplinary program, and you'll find it in the Faculty of Science, the Faculty of Engineering, and the Faculty of Social Sciences. So it's good to keep your mind open when you are looking for programs, because you may find interesting options in different faculties across the campus there. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of the University of Ottawa. I hope that seemed somewhat interesting there. I'm going to go now into more details about the admissions procedure, because I understand that if you're listening to this webinar, you are primarily interested in how to apply for a graduate program. Just to clarify some of the terms that I'm using here, we refer to graduate programs as being those programs that come after your undergraduate, after your bachelor's degree. So this means that you already have the first level of university studies. So the expectation is that you already have a 4-year undergraduate degree. Sometimes, depending on where you come from, you may refer to graduate programs as postgraduate. For us, they mean the same thing. So if you hear in Canada people referring to graduate programs, it means postgraduate programs. I know that can be very confusing sometimes. So first of all, what are the admission requirements? So first and foremost, please be aware that every program will have their own specific requirements. I'm going to talk about some general requirements right now, but please, please, please always check the specific requirements for the program you are interested in. In general, if you wish to apply for a master's degree, you must first have a bachelor's degree. So that's normally a 4-year degree that you would do in Canada, in your home country, in another country. We can accept degrees from all around the world, from a large number of institutions, but you must have completed that degree before you can start a master's degree. If you are interested in doing a PhD, you must already have a research-based master's degree. This can be a little bit different than in some other countries, notably in the United States. In many universities in the United States, students can apply directly to a PhD with no master's. That is not possible at the University of Ottawa. If you want to apply for a PhD at the University of Ottawa, you must complete a master's degree first. All right? So, as a guideline on what you would need to have accomplished during your previous degree, in your bachelor's degree, you should have an average of around a B average, 7 out of 10, 70%, the equivalent to roughly that kind of average if you want to be considered for a master's degree. This does not mean you're guaranteed admission, but it means that an admissions officer will look at your file and consider you. Admissions are always competitive, so it really depends on how you compare to other people who are applying for that program. If you want to do a PhD, as I mentioned, you must complete a master's degree that has a research project in it. So if you do a professional master's degree, for example, an MBA that does not have a research project, you cannot apply for a PhD. If you do a master's degree with a research project, a major research paper, a thesis, then you can apply for a PhD. And you must have an average of your grades in your master's degree of around a B+ average, or 8 out of 10 or 75%. Kind of roughly the equivalent, depending on the different systems. So keep that in mind. If you have grades that are less than this, unfortunately, it's extremely unlikely you will be considered for admission. If you do not have high enough grades, I do recommend that you consider studying somewhere else first to get better grades before applying here. If you apply with grades that are too low, you are going to be wasting some time and money. So I don't want to give you false expectations. If you are wondering kind of how these grade averages convert to your home country, there is a link on your screen right now, and I pasted this URL into the chat in the webinar there, but it is available on our website, and you can get roughly the equivalent to your education system in the country where you have previously studied. So, language requirements. As you can imagine, this is a part of your application. In order to study in English or in French, you must prove that you are capable of studying in English or in French or researching in those languages. Very important, we don't ask for proof of language of both languages. Even if you want to study in both languages, if your program is not officially bilingual, you only need one language test. So for example, if you want to do a master's degree in mechanical engineering, if you want to apply and you want to study in English, only submit one English test. You don't need French tests. You don't need to submit 2 or 3 English tests. You only need one English test. On the other hand, if you want to do a PhD in political science, for example, this program is a bilingual program, and it requires that students speak and study both English and French. In that case, yes, you do have to submit an English and French language test or proof that you speak those languages. But for probably 95% of our programs, you only need one. If you want to take some optional classes in the other language, you can, but you won't need a language test. Very importantly, there are a lot of different tests that are available to students. You probably know at least a couple of them. There's IELTS, which is very popular. There's TOEFL, very popular. There's a few other ones like Cambridge and Pearson. We try to accept most of the large, regular, normally recognized tests, but you only need to submit one. So if you have easy access to IELTS, and that is the easiest and cheapest option, do IELTS. If TOEFL is easier and cheaper for you, do TOEFL. Doing one test over the other does not give you an admission advantage. Similarly, if you meet the minimum requirements, you don't need to do the test again. So for example, if you were applying for a master's degree in science, I believe the language requirement on the IELTS is a 6.5. If you already have a 6.5, but you are trying to make your admission tests, your admission file more competitive, stronger, doing another IELTS to try and increase it, that does not help. Once you get 6.5, it's the same as if you have 9. Okay, so just meet the minimum language requirements. That is okay. All right, so finally, I did want to mention that every program has a different language requirement. So do not assume that they're all the same. So particularly in arts, law, humanities, these types of programs tend to have a higher language requirement because you are going to be reading more complicated documents. For things like science and engineering, medicine, the language requirements is normally a little bit lower, but not always. So please check the exact language requirement for your program of interest. So very quickly, I did want to show a screenshot of our web page where you can search for the specific admission requirements. This is what it looks like. There is the link there. And again, that URL is pasted into the chat in the webinar. But you can go to that link and you can search for the program that you want, and you will find things like the language requirements, the previous study requirements, the admission deadline, because all of these things can be different by program. So please check this page before you do your application, just to make sure that you meet all those requirements and you can meet them in time to start your program. So, as I mentioned, many programs will involve research. If you are doing a research-based graduate program at the University of Ottawa, in many cases, you will be working with a professor as a supervisor. Your supervisor is a full professor who is an expert in his or her field, and this person will guide you and support you to accomplish your research project and your specialization. Your research is going to be unique and individual. It's going to be something that interests you, and it's something that is going to be a way for you to become an expert in something very specific. For many programs, you will need to find a supervisor. That means you will have to contact a professor before you can be admitted. So if you are applying for a PhD in all of our PhD programs, and if you are planning to do a research-based master's degree in science, medicine, engineering, a lot of the traditional hard sciences, in these cases, before you submit an admissions application, you should find a supervisor at the University of Ottawa. This means going on our website, reading about the professors and contacting them and asking, can you be my supervisor? In some cases, if you're doing a professional master's, so master's degrees that have no research, or if you are doing a master's degree that does have research, but it's in arts or social sciences, management, kind of the humanities, in this case, you do not need a supervisor in advance, right? So in those cases, you can apply directly without a professor's name, but once you are admitted and arrive in Ottawa, then you will have to find a supervisor. So that's the order is a little bit different. But again, if you are doing a PhD or a research-based master's degree in the natural sciences, the hard sciences, you must find a professor in advance. So, finding a supervisor. This is really one of the first steps that you will take in your application process, and it is perhaps the most important and unfortunately the most stressful, really. For this reason, take your time. It's not going to happen in one day, unfortunately. I do recommend you take a few weeks for your own thought and careful preparation, and then also it will take time to communicate and effectively negotiate with the professors. I do recommend that you take some time to write a personal research statement that outlines your interest and your general plan. This means you have to carefully consider what you want to research. What do you want to do, and what do you want to be an expert in? And you'll have to research the professors and send this research statement to them. Present yourself and ask, can this person be your supervisor? When you email a professor, I do have a couple points to keep in mind. Keep your email short. Do not go into great detail. You do not need to talk about your childhood and all your hopes and dreams. This is something that you can talk about later, but they get a lot of emails, so you need to be short and succinct and get really to the point and give them the information they need to make a decision. I do recommend include your CV as an attachment. If you have an unofficial copy of your transcripts from all your studies up to that point, include that in the email. If you have done a language test, send an unofficial copy of that, or let them know what your score is. Do not send official copies. This is just for initial information purposes. And then, of course, your research statement. Make sure that it's customized and that it really explains what you want to do and why you want to work with that professor. For the second part, if you are applying for a scholarship from your country of origin, some countries have this, some don't. It really depends on your situation. But if you are applying for an external scholarship, mention this at the beginning of your email. This can make you very attractive to supervisors. They like to see students who have external funding. It shows partly that you're a very good student, and it shows that you're being proactive, which are all very good qualities. It is okay to contact more than one professor at the same time. So when you are researching professors and their profiles, you may find 3 professors who all look very interesting. It's not necessary to send one email to one professor and then wait 2 weeks before contacting the next professor. You can send 3 emails to those 3 professors all at the same time. However, do not send the same email. So you write one email to Professor A, you write a second email to Professor B, and a third email to Professor C. This is okay, and it's okay if the professors know each other. They may even talk to each other. That's okay. That's part of how the system works, and you should not feel bad about that. But if you send one email with all 3 professors in the to line, it will reduce your chances simply because they won't know really who should respond to the email. I strongly recommend separate emails to those different professors. This is because some professors will say no. This is normal. Do not feel bad. Simply because the professors, they may be very, very busy. They may have too many students. They may be going on sabbatical. They may find that your research is in fact not suitable for their work. There are many reasons they might say no, and this is normal. If professors say no, it means you'll have to start contacting a different professor. This is why I do recommend take your time. It may take a few weeks to find a professor who is willing to say yes and willing to accept you. Very much this process is like finding a job. So as you know, you have to apply for many jobs sometimes before you find one that is a good match for you. All right, so very briefly, I would like to give you an overview of the timeline of what you should expect. Of course, every program has a different application deadline, so you should verify the exact deadline for the program of your interest. But in general, I recommend that you start the process of consideration and preparation about 1 year before your program starts. All of our programs start at the beginning of September. Some programs will allow you to start in January, although not so often. Not every program allows this. And honestly, I do not recommend that you start in January. I strongly recommend you start in September, if at all possible. This is because the majority of students will start then. So you'll have the opportunity to form better connections, better networks with your colleagues. And secondly, I hate to say it, but the weather in Ottawa in January can be rather intense. If you are arriving from a warmer country in January, it can be a bit of a shock, and it does not help with your integration and arrival. In general, we find that students who arrive in September and start their studies in September, they do much better socially and academically than the students who arrive in January. Sometimes for certain programs, it's possible to start in May, but that is very rare. So based on the timeline of starting your program in September, you should start researching your supervisor, considering what you want to do around September. Start contacting them, presenting who you are, what you want to do. Usually between September and December is a good time to submit your initial online application. So this means you go to our website, you will fill out the application form. It can be a little bit long, but the information is not surprising. It's asking your name, your address, it asks where you previously studied, all those kinds of details. The online application, it takes about 2 weeks for all of the data to be processed. After about 2 weeks, you will receive an email from the university confirming that we've received all your data and your application, and you will receive information on how to sign into your online student account. And this is where you'll get information about where to send your official documents. It will also give you the status. It will tell you if your application is complete or if you're missing something. And this will be done kind of late fall, or late Canadian fall, I should say, into early winter. So October to January is when you'll be starting to look at the sending in official documents, making sure your application is complete. Once the application is complete, it will be evaluated. So between March and April, that's when you'll start to see everything is complete, all the documents have been received, or hopefully, if you have sent them. And usually around March or April is when you will start to receive admission responses from the various faculties. They do not come all at once, so it really depends on your program and your faculty, but usually around March and April. Usually, if you are going to apply for a scholarship from your country, you may require additional documents to support your application. You may have to get letters from your supervisor, different tuition confirmations from the university. Usually this is done around April to May. You submit all of those things. You should also apply for your study permit. Every international student needs a study permit. Even if you do not need a visa to enter Canada, if you wish to study in Canada, you must apply for a study permit. And you would do that ideally around May or so, once you have your offer of admission from the university. Usually mid to late summer, Canadian summer, you'll start to receive answers about scholarships. You'll get information about different options and programs that you can do in addition to your academics. And then, of course, at the beginning of September, you arrive in Ottawa and you'll begin your studies. So I hope that gives a little bit of an idea of what you can expect as you're going through this. So that concludes my formal presentation there. Once again, my name is Kyle. That is my name up on the screen. There is my email address there that you can contact me at. I would like to mention, very important, for those of you who are from Mexico, we do have a new office, a new representative office in Mexico to specifically guide Mexican students. You can contact this office at mexico@uottawa.ca. mexico@uottawa.ca. And they are based in Mexico City, and they can help guide you with specific needs that you might have with Mexico. For those of you from other countries, we certainly want to support you. We just have not been able to open offices and have representatives based in your countries yet, but we'll see where the future might take us. So that concludes my presentation right now. I don't know if anyone has questions, but I believe that you should be able to type questions in the chat in the webinar, and I will be very happy to answer them as best I can.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. So anyone that has any questions, feel free to type them on the public chat, and whether they are like a specific or general, and Kyle will be happy to answer them.
As I did mention, the URLs, the websites, that were on the webinar, they are all listed. They're pasted here in the chat. I'm sorry, they're quite squished together. The formatting got messed up when I did the copy and paste. I just sent to the email address for the Mexico office. Again, it's mexico@uottawa.ca. Oh, yes. I see a few people typing. I did want to take this opportunity to mention that if you are applying for a graduate program, so the master's or PhD programs, I do recommend that you get in touch directly with the faculties. So the very last link that I pasted at the beginning of the chat, there's a page where you can search for the different faculties and departments. I do recommend that you try and coordinate directly with the faculties and departments, simply because they are the ones who are the experts in your specific programs, and they are the ones who are making the decisions. So for the University of Ottawa, our admissions process at the graduate level, so for master's and PhD, it is decentralized. That means that the different faculties make their own independent decisions. So that's why I do recommend contact the faculties if you have specific questions about your admission process in a file or in a program. So we're getting a few questions here. Andres asked if we can get, there's a recording. Juan, I believe that is true. You're
Yes,
recording this?
after the presentation is over, we'll upload the presentation on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out. And yeah, you can check the presentation there.
Right, yes. So that will be made available.
Yes.
Next question, there is a question about an age limit. No, there is no age limit. You could be 99 years old and that is okay. I will mention that if you are 99 years old, supervisors may question why you want to do a super intense research program, but there's no formal age limit. If you're aged 45, as Christian seems to mention there specifically, that is not a limit to your admissions. However, I do recommend that you explain in your application your we'll say your career path. If you are changing careers and changing to something completely different, that can be okay. However, it is important that you have a logic and that you explain why you are doing that and that you feel you are prepared for a very different career path. This will also be important when you do your study permit application. For immigration, the embassy will be asking, what is the logic for your plan? Why do you want to do what you are proposing? If, for example, you are staying in the same career and you are simply wanting to upgrade your skills, you have 1 degree in chemical engineering, but now you want a master's degree, that can be okay. But again, you want to explain that you have developed your career and you are trying to advance your career now. You are trying to get an advanced degree and further your knowledge. So it's very important that you have a good reason for what you are trying to do. All right, I see a question about the MPH. It's Arturo Romero. I don't know if you could, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what MPH is referring to. Master of Public Health. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes, you are correct. So up until now, we have only had a PhD in public health. They are working on that, but I have not heard of an official start date yet. I would imagine that you would be able to start applying in the next few months. You could start applying maybe around September of 2020 to potentially start that program in September 2021. However, I do not have the confirmation for that. But you are correct that it's coming soon. Unfortunately, it's not yet available at the master's level. Andres also asked Juan if there will be presentations from the other Caldo universities. I'll let Juan add, but I believe the answer is yes. That is the case.
Yes, we're having an upcoming presentation on March for the University of Saskatchewan and Western University. It's on March 31st. So we'll start promoting that one soon, so you can join the registration and yeah, join us on that webinar too.
Right. Thank you, Juan. I see a question now from Jose asking about supervisor approval and unconditional admission letters. So kind of 2 points here. For your supervisor approval, so if you contact a professor and the professor says, yes, I love you, please come do research with me, that is fantastic. That helps a lot. But you are not admitted yet. So if you find a supervisor who says yes, effectively you're about 80% done. You're 80% in, but not yet. Once you have that professor who says yes, you have the professor's name, then you will do a formal admissions application, sending in your documents indicating the professor's name. The faculty must do a verification of your documents, and the faculty will send you your letter of admission. So just because a professor says yes does not mean it is finalized. You must still do a formal application. But if a professor says yes, it's a very good chance you will be admitted. I wouldn't worry too much once you have that professor. So by extension, the idea of an unconditional admission letter. So this, it really depends on your situation. So the university or the faculty will offer unconditional offers of admission if everything is done. So this means you have the supervisor, you have completed all the your previous studies, you have the necessary language requirements, you have everything done. Then in that case, they will give you an unconditional admission letter. However, if you are currently studying right now, for example, and you submit your application, if you had already submitted your application, say 3 months ago, but you are still working on finishing your degree, and you finish your classes in June, the university may say, yes, we can admit you, but if they send their letter of admission in May, before you finish in June, they may say in their letter that you are admitted on the condition of you finishing your classes. So those types of conditions could still be applied even if a professor says yes. I don't know if that was entirely clear or if that was a little bit confusing. I suspect it was a little bit confusing. So if basically having a professor does not mean that it will be unconditional. This is the short answer to your question, Jose. I see a question from Arturo about campus life with kids, or live off campus. So in general, I'll speak about living. We do have residences on campus. However, they're not suitable for families. They are very much meant for young single students. Honestly, if you are applying for a master's or PhD, I do not recommend that you live on campus. The university residences are designed for a certain demographic, namely those first-year, 18-year-old undergraduate students. You can apply to live on campus if you want, but keeping in mind that the majority of the people you will be living with will likely have a different approach to their lifestyles and their studies. That being said, we do have an off-campus housing service that can help guide students to find a house or apartment or a room in a house around the city. In fact, the majority of our students do live off campus. So many students, they may live on campus for 1 year and then they go off and rent a room somewhere else around the city. As I mentioned, we do have a public transit network, and all students have a transit pass. So even if you live on campus, as part of your fees, you get a transit pass included. So all students can ride the bus and take the train unlimited for free. So it's not a problem to live elsewhere in the city. That is okay. And especially if you have a family, there are many options available, but they would be in private housing off campus. I think that answers all the questions, right? Oh, the name of the suburbs. So yes, the downtown core, it's Ottawa. As you go further out to the east, there is a suburb called Orleans. I just typed it in the chats. And to the west, there is Kanata, not to be confused with Canada. The suburb is called Kanata. And then there are a few, these are the very distinct east and west parts of the city that are a little bit further out from the center of the city. Many people live there. Many people who work in the city will live there and come in. Many students live there. And there are other neighborhoods as well. But those are the two main ones that are kind of on the east and west, respectively. I will mention there is another city named Gatineau. This is technically a different city because it is in a different province. It is in the province of Quebec. So Ottawa, as you may know, it is located in the province of Ontario, but it is right on the river, on the border with the province of Quebec. So if you cross the river, you will be entering another city, technically. That city is called Gatineau. And if you live there, many students choose to live there. They simply cross the bridge each morning to come to class or to go to work in Ottawa. Walking is certainly possible, depending where you live. I will admit that it can be rather windy and therefore cold in the winter, but there are buses that cross the river. Many students and workers live across the river and commute each day. Gatineau can be a good option to consider for single students and for families. Generally speaking, the rent tends to be a little bit cheaper in Gatineau than in Ottawa itself, simply because you have to cross the river. It's a little bit further away, but it is very manageable and very accessible. So I hope that helps to answer some of your questions. I will be available to answer other questions via email if you have any. Feel free to contact the different faculties and departments as well if you have specific programs in mind. And as I mentioned, take your time to really consider what you want to do if you are intending to do research. If you want to do a professional program, such as an MBA or Master of Engineering Management, for example, these are not research-based, you can send in your application directly online. No need to contact professors in advance. So I hope that clarifies some things, but please ask your questions, as I'm sure more questions will pop into your minds later. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle, for your presentation. It was great, and thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and be sure to follow our next our upcoming webinars. The next one we have is on March 31st, as I mentioned before. They're going to be for the University of Saskatchewan and Western University. Thank you, Kyle, again. And I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you very much, Juan, and everyone else.